live. Lifelong fulfillment, vision in action. You live. Lifelong fulfillment, vision in action. Live.
Hello, everyone. I'm Grace Simon, breakthrough and success coach, speaker, and trainer. And I'm your host today for this episode of Vision in Action Live. And on this Vision in Action Live, it's very special. We focus on the process and the expert knowledge and solutions that it takes to work on your individual personal development. These are the component pieces that allow you to construct and live the complete vision of your best life. To do this, we bring you representative experts from every conceivable discipline that can inform your thinking about your own journey to lifelong fulfillment. Welcome. Let's see what's on for today's episode. Today, we have a discussion with Jim Boswell about strategic personal development. Jim Boswell is the author of Lifelong Fulfillment, Take Charge of Your Life. Its companion website, Lifelong Fulfillment, and the Vision in Action Live podcast hosted on YouTube and distributed to your favorite podcast channel. Jim comes to personal development with over 50 years of academic and individual experience. In addition to career experience in the U.S. Navy submarines, electronics, software, marketing, and business consulting. Welcome to you all. It's great to have you with us today, Jim. This is very exciting, Jim.
Thank you. It's fun to be on the hot seat.
I know it's going to be a different feeling for you for sure. But I know that you're ready. You're always very well prepared and you're passionate about this topic. So it's going to be a lot of fun. The challenges of becoming fully self-actualized humans is best addressed with dependable, strategic personal development concepts and practices that allow individuals to create the best results and not waste time, attention, resources, and human capital. And doing it right the first time can benefit immensely. So let's hear what our guest has to say about this. I'm excited. Let's hear what you have to say about it, Jim.
Okay. Well, let's start out with some common sense approaches to this. All of us here are born into this life, and we have certain choices to make. In the past, personal development rarely was regarded as an objective by most of the populace. You did what your dad did for a career, or you followed your intuition, or you got somebody telling you what to do. Your opportunity for individual personal development was not a number one topic for an individual. It was your career, your family, your duty to your country, and whatever else. Well, these days we're a little different. There's a very strong drumbeat about personal development in the world in general, especially in North America, where it's even more vocal. And it's an opportunity that we all have to enrich ourselves and derive satisfaction out of the lives we're going to lead. And there's I sort of view it as there's three ways to do this. You can sort of be passive about it, and you'll get what you get. And your intuition may be good, but it might also be pretty flawed as you go through life. You may or may not seek the kind of resources to help you do this correctly because you're passive about it, right? You're not committed to ideas and processes that will help you do this in an active fashion. The other way is to let other people decide it for you. The military will do that. Your family strictures that you grew up with, your acculturation can all do that. And you can just fall in line, and pretty much that's, will evolve over time. You can exercise some influence there. But there's another, and this is what's current, is if we really focus on self-actualization over a lifetime, from, teenage years to retirement, there's a lot of things we can do as individuals to affect, whatever we want out of life. And this also helps us and prevents us from wasting time and resources and running down blind alleys and doing trial and error, which tends to be kind of wasteful, to be frank. So I, of course, like self-actualization and the self-investment arena. That's what I do. It's what I did for myself during my 50 years prior to now, and what I try and help people get a vision for through Vision in Action and lifelong fulfillment initiatives. And so I call this strategic because with a vision about how this process works over a lifetime, you can make better choices about individual solutions that you want to engage. You will probably be more aware of career issues, about how you want to feel about your life. Do you want a family? Do you want to be married? Do you want to live in the United States or someplace else? I mean, everything comes up for question, and you're better armed to answer those questions earlier in your life than if you just let them come up as they come up. So I kind of advocate more of an active version of engagement for self-development. One of the ways to help center this is you start with psychology, and Maslow's hierarchy does us a great favor of explaining, what are the basic things we need to survive, what, kinds of things reward us psychologically. In other words, where you have a sense of connection with family, loved ones, and that sort of thing. And then when you take that self-intention and start looking at achieving things, like maybe you want to, have a specific career goal. Maybe you want to focus on family. Maybe you want to find some balance between the two. Maybe you have a hobby that's very important to you. But you also decide at that point, or get the opportunity to say, is happiness all I really want out of life? Because happiness is kind of in the middle section of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's more an emotional reaction to what you are receiving, what's happening with yourself, your environment, and how you're doing in that environment. There's also another level further up the Maslow's hierarchy, which talks about self-actualization. And that's really what Maslow himself was focused on. And this has to do with setting goals, objectives, achieving things over a lifetime, different things at different points in your lifetime, but things that you define as meaningful to you, not that someone else defines them, that you define, and that you go achieve, or you put effort toward. And then there's another that probably is on the very tip of Maslow, and that is some people really want to seek the wisdom of their life. In other words, having practiced life for 70, 80 years, at that point, they're fully self-actualized, and there's some wisdom they may have derived from the process of being a human being, something they feel good about internally, something they can discuss and pass on. So you can pick and choose between those, and there's nothing wrong with any one of the three levels of satisfaction either, because we're all built differently. And I should focus on that one thing too, and make a note, is that self-actualization for me is totally different than for someone else, for you, Grace, or anyone else on the street. And it's a customized process. There is no specific do this and these are the results you'll get. There are tools of the trade to help you along the way, but in the final analysis, who you become is entirely up to you. Whether you choose to lead a life of default or a life of design, those are the choices you have. So starting out, that was a great incentive for me. I was a guy who was kind of a late bloomer from a career and direction perspective, but I was really big on continuing education and making sure that I got exposed to factual information I could make good, solid decisions about. And at different stages, businesses and guidance and so forth occurred for me to help me keep that vision alive and to evolve it over a time from when I was in my mid-20s to when I'm a mid-career professional to the time when, oh my God, retirement's looming. And so what I try and do these days is try and bring some of that focus to discussions so that people have resources that are vetted, processes that make sense. They can make good decisions with good return on that investment when they want to go get counseling or coaching, or they want to participate in an educational forum, or they want to go for a graduate degree, or they want to be married and have, 1.3 kids, or whatever it happens to be. So that's kind of how it happens. And you have to recognize, if you're looking at strategic development of a life plan, it doesn't all happen in your 20s. You can't possibly learn enough fast enough for it to happen all then. But if you're doing the right things in your 20s, you're building a foundation for being happy and making progress on your self-actualization in your 20s and setting a foundation for continuing that, say, in your 30s and 40s. And that also informs your thought processes when you get to, say, 55, 60 or so, and decide, well, I'm probably going to wind down the career or what I'm doing and look at, maybe a different lifestyle in retirement. So the good thing about having this overall plan allows you to strategize it. It allows you to make better decisions. It allows you to move your self-development along at a reasonable pace without wasting time, effort, and energy. Now, with that, it comes a caveat. Life always has upsets. There are speed bumps in life. We take a job and we have to move. We have kids. We have a financial reversal. I get fired. I get relocated. A death in the family. These are things that once you recognize they will happen to you, and yes, they're going to disrupt your plan, but then you have an informed approach to when these things are going to happen. If it's a surprise, it's harder to respond to a surprise. You need longer to digest it, to maybe get through a cycle of grief, and then reassert your individual agendas, if you will. So we're not saying that this avoids those. It does not, but it does comprehend that, there's flexibility in how you execute this, because things are going to happen that are unanticipated, but that are just simply part of being alive and being a human. So that's the overview, Grace.
It's a big overview, but it's really what you're describing, Jim, and just to really bring it down to a really basic level for myself, and maybe others that are similar, to the understanding that we're causative beings, right? We're causative beings, that law of cause and effect. The majority of the world lives on the effect side, believing that life happens to them. And just in summary of what you've been saying is that, we don't want to live on that effect side. We want to live on the causative side of living, in that, describing what that vision is for you as a causative being, of you creating what it is that you want in your future. And everything you said was really, really fascinating. And you've been through so many different things in life that has helped you to evolve and to understand and to formulate that idea and that process of how important and how powerful it is to understand that you can create your future and being very intentional and living a very intentional life, because life happens. It
does.
goes through really quickly, doesn't it?
It does indeed. It does indeed.
As you were talking, Jim, I was thinking about my son who's 25 years old, and you said that you were later on in starting a career. And, from when we were younger, we started life a lot earlier. I got married at 19, I don't know how old you were. You're probably
Wow,
older than I was.
a
You
little
got
bit.
married. So life happened really quickly. But now they're saying, Jim, that youth are actually in adolescence till 36 years old now.
Till 36.
Till
Wow.
36 years old.
Uh, that's a long time. Maybe I
That's a
wasn't
long time. That's
so,
why your message is so important. What you shared today
yeah,
with our listeners is so important because we are in, we're in mental health crisis. We're in, like when you are in the personal development world and that's your world. You think that everybody's in that world and understands it and is in it, but the truth of it is that very, very few are in that world of personal development, and that's why we're in such a mental health crisis in a lot of ways, because that emotions that you were talking about is being driven by other people, when it's
right,
so important for us to understand,
right.
when we have that foundation of who we are, right, whose we are and why we're doing what we're doing and why it matters, then we're
Hmm.
less likely to be driven by everything that tosses you side to side and living that life of life happening to you instead of through you. So what you've spoken of, the formula and the stages, is so imperative for people to understand, to not live this effect side, that there's a causative, that you really do have a choice of, and the choice is you can let life happen to you, or you can let life happen through you by living in this bigger vision. And that's why the purpose of this podcast is so vital, so
Right.
important. So I appreciate everything you
Well,
said.
well, some of the things that you have to deal with is the environment that we grow up in, right? And there's certain things about the environment that are good for personal development, and certain things about the environment that actually frustrate it. So, for instance, we are totally overloaded, at least in North America, with the white noise associated with the internet and everybody voicing everybody's opinion and so forth and so on. One of the things that's difficult is to understand the valuable conversation as opposed and actually sort it out from all that noise. So one thing is everybody wants your attention, but nobody other than you knows where your attention belongs. And so you can get caught up in responding to everybody and everything at the expense of your own focus.
Mm.
And to do good personal development, focus is essential. That's why even a plan that's even a partial plan or just a gut feeling you convert into goals and maybe some things to do is better than responding to all this white noise and misdirection. So that's one of the downsides. One of the upsides is there's a lot of demand for self fulfillment and self actualization help. So there's coaches, there's counselors, there's therapists, and so forth. The problem is the demand far exceeds the amount of people that work in those professions. So,
Mm.
for instance, in coaching, there's much more demand for coaching than there are numerically coaches to do the work. The same is true in the psychology professions. So there's a lot of that. So one of the fallbacks is the more self-effective we can be as individuals about our planning and about supporting our own process, it doesn't frustrate us quite so much as saying, well, I've got to have a coach or a counselor right now to do this, because there's things we can do and then say, be more bulletized or focused on what do I really want from that counselor and when it is appropriate to engage them. And is that have a good return on that investment? So the more empowered we individually are on our own behalf, the less we have to depend upon, a lack of resources, if you will. So that's the other part. So it's good. We've got a growing interest in it. We do have certain resources, and we have the ability now to say, yes, I can understand the cradle to grave issues with doing my own development. And I am empowered to manage that. And there's things I can do independent of having to have a professional help me until it's appropriate. And every person has to make these decisions about how much outside help they need, how much they're going to do themselves, and so forth. But without a system, if you will, I would say it becomes more difficult. So that's what I focus on. The other thing that's actually pretty imperative is you have to start dealing with your acculturation from growing up. You have to deal with the issues of, tabling that and your peer pressure and maybe duty, religion, patriotism, any institutional dogma that you've been exposed to, and start looking to shift your focus to factual resources. Not that you don't have emotions, but emotions should come to some intersection with the facts about being a human being, what your psychology is about moving forward. And there's a comfortable level where those two can engage and support each other. The more facts you focus on, these are typically more dependable in producing good results. The more you get caught up in your emotional state, frustration, getting stuck, those sorts of things, those become a drag on your progress. So we try and minimize that. We try and have an authentic connection between one's emotions, their psychology, and factual goals and processes that we use to make progress. And so that's part of the challenge. We're not trying to deny anybody their preferences, far from it, but we're trying to rationalize them to something that's usable, reasonably predictable, and that you can actually bank on. And the other thing we need to insert in this is that every stage of life we're going to be working on the issue of, I don't know what I don't know. And so this system that I try and work with the Lifelong Fulfillment Initiative, tries to help ameliorate that issue. We always have it. As young people, there's an awful lot of stuff we just simply don't know. And information is in an exponential growth pattern. And one of our frustrations is, how do I manage all that information to get what I need, as opposed to what other people think I need or want to press on me? And so this is the reason we have a browser, that we store data in server farms, that we now are, interested in AI so it can help make our decisions for us. And that's a debate for another time. But the point being is, there's so much out there. Without focus in the self-actualization agenda, then you can wind up wasting a lot of time and effort. So that's another reason that we have to deal with this. When you're young, you don't know what you don't know. You got a lot of learning to do. And that just comes with the territory, because that's the way humans develop. When you wind up in, say, mid-career, you kind of solved those problems, or you came to some resolution about them, and now you're building on another vision. Maybe it's mid-career, maybe it's becoming a millionaire, maybe it's, supporting a wide-ranging family, or whatever your personal, goals might be. And by the time you reach retirement, you have a whole different set. At retirement, there's things you still don't know, believe it or not. I will attest to that. And so at every stage of life, whether you're a young adult, mid-career adult, mature, or if you're a potential retiree, our issues are different, but we all have a different set of things we don't know that we have to be working on. Because again, that informs the decisions we make toward the life goals that will be self-satisfying. One of the issues is balance. And I've always had this problem. I can very easily overfocus on career and personal objectives at the expense of other things, emotional connections, say, maintaining and working to have, a core of friends, things like that. And other people have it the other way. Sometimes they have that, they're more family associated, and their issue is, I want a career, but I don't want that to be my primary focus. So juggling your focus between all these duty expectations, your self, actualization, your family, and all this other thing is, I think, a very difficult thing to do. And to each of us, I think it is a challenge. When you're better armed, I think you can make better decisions about balance. But I would be far from the expert to say what that is, because I think it's individual in nature. So, family, children, employment decisions, citizenship changes, any number of things are part of that balance conversation that you have to have with yourself. And it will change over time. You might be balanced one way for a period of your life. It might shift in a later period of your life. And that's okay too, because you're the director of your own game plan. So let me just give you some instances. So let's say, and this is very personal, because let's just say I just got an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's in science, and I'm looking at taking a master's degree, and I started one in industrial engineering. And I'm working part-time, right, to fund that education. I ran out of money. I finally realized that it didn't matter how much time I worked. If I worked more, I was going to be too tired to do the education, the master's degree in industrial engineering. And it became what I call a strategic inflection point. In other words, when the dissonance is high and you're frustrated and you're tired, it is a point where you need to do something different. So I simply dropped back and started looking at, okay, what do I need and what do I want? One of them, very clearly, that I could focus on and be clear about was more education. And I was also interested in developing people skills, business skills, things like that. So I looked around and said, well, what's possible given the situation I'm in? I didn't see a way to develop it locally. It's through my university, through the town I lived in, but I looked at the military and some of their education for experience kind of alternatives. And I ultimately wound up going into U.S. Navy nuclear submarines.
Oh.
So I learned to manage people. I learned management processes. Yes, they're very different. But I also had the GI Bill that got me an MBA coming out of that service. And so on a temporary short-term basis, that met a set of goals that I had. It was difficult. I left friends behind. I moved. In fact, I moved every 3 years just about during that period. But I met some exceptional people. I met people who really would turn around and help and coach and promote you through their processes, teach you what they were based on. So there was a lot of knowledge to be gained. Some of it academic, some of it hands-on and personal, some of it business-oriented. And I look back on it, and to this day, it has very much influenced my frame of mind and the things that I do. So that was one instance. The other one, I've had a number of speed bumps. I'm not a guy who has been married for 50 years. I've had several experiences along the way. I've also, my mother died early. I've had other deaths and so forth. And for me, those are pretty big events and have a lot of influence on me. And learning to recover from the grief cycle and get back on with life was a learning process too. And I went for help. I went to a clinical social worker, and they helped me focus back on, okay, here's how the process works, but here's some other things to help you understand. So they would tend to want to use the Socratic question and answer method with me. And I did that for a while, but then I started saying, look, I need better guidance than this and more of it than we have time and resources between us to do. So help me find the books that'll tell me, help me find a new vision. And that really helped a lot. So these are typical things. I'm not unique in this. Other people will have different kinds of experiences, but these are change change agents. These inflection points in life frequently change your focus, your vision, and then you need to redefine, okay, what is my path forward? And what do I need to do about it? And if you're empowered with the things that the Lifelong Fulfillment Initiative offers, which is vetted authoritative sources in almost any discipline you might name, there's a book associated with it. There's a process in the book that I've used for probably over 40 years that comes from other experts, not from me, but I've encapsulated it so that it's useful for almost anyone, say from 20 years old onward. And it allows you to actualize on it. So that's kind of taking the specific back to the general and having a framework. And what I like about it is when I had problems, I had a framework. I could decide what was the rifle shot solution rather than doing a lot of trial and error. And again, I focused on factual alternatives as opposed to, I could have gone the religious route. I'm not really built that way, so I didn't do that. But I went through, I read up on a bunch of psychology as a result, and that really informed my future choices. So at every stage, you're building from that foundation that you've set for the next set of challenges, the next set of opportunities.
It's absolutely fabulous and really fascinating how, how one decision, to move in a direction opened up the doors to so much more, right? Decision is such a powerful activation, right? Having a perspective of saying something needs to change. I'm stuck here. What do I need to do, to move forward? What is there available for me to move forward, to get me to the next step or to the next motion. So I love how your journey has really evolved from the basis of a decision, being willing and being open, right, to move from where you were. A lot of people just choose to be stuck, and you have a full life of experiences that are, like you said, Jim, our roadmap is very different from one another, right? My experiences are very different from your experiences, but it's that ability to, to see where you're at, right? And to have a vision of where it is you want to go. You don't have each and every step. You don't know what it takes to actually get there, but it's being willing and being open to ask yourself powerful questions, right? Being able to look around what's around you and what is available for you to have access to, and then taking the step to do that. Because the answers are never always there, but it's in that next step. It's in that, in that willingness to see and to be able to have a shift in your perspective in order to have that growth. So, yeah, I was wondering how you got into the military. So first of all, thank you for your service. Amazing. But also I was so intrigued, wondering, your life is so full. How did you get into the Army? How did you get into the military? That is why, because of running out of money and wanting to get through school.
Well, it was looking at service as, okay, if you're going to do this for your country, that you take off the blinders of pure patriotism, if you will, and say, okay, yes, I have something to offer them. They have something to offer to me. It's a synergy that works. We both are better for the engagement. And being empowered as an individual, because the military, you're always re-upping, so to speak, for the next stint. So I agreed to 6 years, but it was very much a known quantity, what I would be doing, where I would wind up. And yes, there were some changes in how that all came about, but essentially I got a ton of great experience out of it. I got an education out of it, both on the job and after, and it made a lot of sense. And it was a fairer transaction, I think, than somebody who goes in as a private into the military simply because they don't have other options. and they're not thinking strategically about what do I want to get out of this other than I've got a job, they're going to feed me, house me, pay me, right? Um, so, and I'm not encouraging absolute selfishness here, nor am I encouraging being, essentially following somebody else's directive. You mentioned as you were commenting here about one thing that I think people really struggle with, and this is the risk reward scenario. This is very common in business because everything business does has a certain amount of risk to it. You get kind of used to taking what are called weighted risks. And when you convert that to a personal level, we don't really spend a lot of time about that. So when you make a decision about your life, one of the things we try and help highlight is how big a risk for how big a reward is the initiative that you want to do next. And is it something you can be comfortable with? And how do I get comfortable with that? So if you're solo on your own and you're deciding that you want to go do something and it has, say, a 50-50 risk, 50% risk of failure, 50% risk of success, but the success is, say, an MBA and automatically a job that pays $100,000 a year, just to pick an example, then it might be a little easier to entertain the risk you take in doing that. If it is just the opposite, and it's like it's open-ended, I can't define the risk, then you're probably not going to be comfortable with taking the risk. And we all face that. We do it generally based on gut. And what we try and do with the lifelong fulfillment is add a little numbers to it or a process of thinking that helps you get away quite so much from your gut reaction to what's the facts of the situation. Do they validate that I should take this risk and be comfortable with it and put my every effort into its success? Or should I back away and look at other alternatives? Because there's always other alternatives. And people are either risk averse, moderately risk tolerant, or there's crazy people on the leading edge that, will risk anything. So we have a whole spectrum of attitudes about risk that, we have to deal with. I happen to be in the middle to the, lunatic fringe a little bit. So I tend to be more comfortable with it. And I had a lot of that exposure through business that I was in, because I was in electronics in the early days. And, there was always risk involved with that. So that's something we try and help people overcome in themselves and inform them so that they can manage it. The other thing we talk about is staying focused. These strategic inflection points tend to defocus, but they are opportunities to refocus. So there's a positive coming out of every upset that you may have, and it's the chance to refocus on what's important, revalidate, and maybe reformulate your plan at that particular point. Things like our return on investment, which is probably overused and never personalized. Actually, it's really a pretty good way at a personal level to do that. Remembering too that, business is about human beings. It's people interacting with each other, whether it's a client or a customer or a provider or a service or a product. Everything we do is derived from human psychology, human interaction, and so forth. So the very best of interesting things is that business will spend tons of money optimizing decision processes. Well, guess what? If you pay attention to what comes out of business as advice for how to do it right, very often it's right on in how you might want to manage your own personal life. And they've spent tons of money doing it. And you get the advantage of stealing their ideas and stealing their advice and using it for your own. So that's a clue I provide because I've done it. I like it. And, it resourced me for free, essentially. All I had to do was read, listen, take trainings, things like that. And it's like, wow, that was a pretty good deal.
I love that. You're so so insightful that you were able to pull that out. And we don't have to take the time to do that. We can just read your book and listen to your podcast and learn your material. What a wonderful, wonderful gift that you've given, your life goals, your life experience, your decisions. You have you've taken the time to create templates and guides and really insightful, meaningful programs like this, to help others to not have to struggle, but to have a greater understanding of how to process and move to the different phases of life, and understanding that emotion shouldn't drive our behavior, that there is a better approach. There's a more analytical, more derived, more guided approach that we can take. And that is so important and so needed, Jim. So thank you so much for sharing yourself with the world and making it so accessible to everyone to have at their fingertips, at their eyes, right, their ears.
Right.
Whether you like to listen, you can listen to this podcast or read your book and download your material. It's absolutely
Yeah.
fascinating. So I want to thank our guest, Jim Boswell. Thank you for attending Vision in Action Live, and we hope you got some answers to your burning questions. Vision in Action Live podcast focus on interviews with subject matter experts and people leading self-directed lives so that you can see what you can accomplish toward your personal development. Check out newsletters, podcasts, and extensive reference materials at lifelongfulfillment.com. All of it is free. Can you believe it? All of it is free for us to have access. And you can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, your favorite podcast channel, and EPRED Internet Radio. I'm Grace Simon, your host. Until the next episode, when are you planning on coming?
Lifelong fulfillment, vision in action.